What if I were to say to you, there are some things it's too late for, and we are in the age of consequences, but there are other things it's not too late for. We can still massively soften our landing. We can gradually start to stop the damage that we're doing and start to restore it. We can become better adapted to the damaged world that we've created, and we can gradually reduce the damage and then start to reverse it. What if I were to say to you, that's how it is. It's 5 past midnight, but it's only 5 past midnight. Would you believe me?
We wanted to get engaged. We want you on board. This is our first generation restoration or ecosystem restoration event ever as a United Nations Association, Climate and Oceans. We are based here in the UK. Our president is Sir Richard Jolly. I am the founder and chair. We are basically a grassroots organization, and we're trying to engage more and more projects and organizations in this adventure with us, engaging with the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. So this is our fantastic event, Ecosystem Restoration, and as part of a global movement, which was launched last year by the United Nations itself, which is called the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration. So what is the United Nations Decade on Ecosystem Restoration? The decade aims to massively scale up the restoration of degraded and destroyed on land and marine ecosystems as a proven measure to fight the climate crisis and enhance food security, water supply, and biodiversity. The whole decade globally is coordinated by the UN Environment Programme and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, precisely because of the global threats that we face for the future: food, food security, water, and biodiversity.
Thank you, Gonzalo. That was fabulous. And in response, really, what we are doing here at Furnace Brook is to respond to that call to arms. And where we're working to create an arts and ecology hub here, applying permaculture principles to the management of the land, some 20 acres here, and linking up with other projects that I and colleagues have been working on over the last 2 decades in Kent and elsewhere. So we're delighted to join and be part of this ecosystem restoration initiative. We're part of a sort of collaborative framework here, in particular under the title of the Rural Transition Alliance Programme, and you'll hear more about that from Brian Spooner, one of the speakers, later on. A quote from some of you may have heard from Churchill back in 1938, which is equally applicable to the times we live in now. The area of procrastination, of half measures, of soothing and baffling expedients, of delays is coming to a close. It is in its place, we are entering a period of consequences.
Thank you so much, Alistair and Gonzalo. And so I can't think of anyone better to follow up that introduction than Professor Rupert Read, who has a fantastic title for his section. It's a bit of a tongue twister, but I'll give it a go. Transformative Adaptation as a Mind Bomb, How Building Community Resilience Can Restore Our Ecosystems and Restore Our Mental Ecosystems too.
Thanks for that kind introduction. And it's great to be here at this wonderful place. Now, what if I were to say to you, it's not too late. There's still hope. There's still time. It's 5 minutes to midnight, but the clock hasn't run out yet. We can still solve everything. We can solve climate change. We can solve the biodiversity crisis. We can solve everything. Everything's going to be fine. Even if we don't sort things out in the next decade or so, there'll be some magic tech that will come along in 2050 and 2060, sort it out for us. It's 5 minutes to midnight. It's not too late. Would you believe me? Would you find that message convincing? But what if I were to try this instead? What if I were to say to you, it's too late. It's over. It's the end times. We're doomed. We're bound to collapse. There's really nothing we can do. We've left it far too late. Excuse me, to the young people in the audience. Would you believe me? Well, what if I were to say to you, There are some things that it's too late for, and other things it's not too late for. It's not 5 minutes to midnight, but that doesn't mean that we're doomed. What if I were to say to you, it's kind of 5 minutes past midnight. Yeah, we're in the age of consequences. There are some things it's too late for. It's too late now to have a serene, smooth transition. If there was ever going to be a possibility of that, we would have had to have started much more seriously 40, 50 years ago. It's too late, tragically, to stay below 1.5 degrees, to stay in the safe zone climatically. Because if we were going to do that, then what the IPCC says, and I'm an expert reviewer for the IPCC, what they've said in the latest report is we need to make deep and immediate cuts in global CO2 emissions. So we need to make those cuts worldwide if we are to stay below 1.5 degrees. And they clarified in answer to questions that by immediate, they meant this year. What if I were to say to you, there are some things it's too late for, and we are in the age of consequences, but there are other things it's not too late for. We can still massively soften our landing. We can gradually start to stop the damage that we're doing and start to restore it. We can become better adapted to the damaged world that we've created, and we can gradually reduce the damage and then start to reverse it. What if I were to say to you, that's how it is. It's 5 past midnight, but it's only 5 past midnight. Would you believe me? So maybe we're onto something there. My passionate belief is that something like this narrative shift changes everything. We've been stuck for a long time. The clock has been stuck at 5 minutes to midnight. Well, to be fair, Boris Johnson at COP26 said it's 1 minute to midnight. He pushed it a little bit closer. We'll take that at face value. Say it was 1 minute to midnight. COP26 failed us. What the IPCC said we would need to do in order to stay below 1.5 degrees, it's absolutely not going to happen. Worldwide cuts in emissions, deep and immediate. No, that's not the way things are going. It's not what most countries are doing, tragically, in response to the Ukraine crisis. So there are things that it is too late for, but there are many other things that it is not too late for. I believe that this message, this narrative shift, is a mind bomb, that it will explode. It can explode slowly or quickly in people's minds and take us out of this impossible, useless space that we've been in for ages of 5 minutes to midnight, of people trying to convince us over and over again, we've got one last chance, and now we've got another last chance, and now we've got another last chance, into a space of accepting that we are in a damaged world and facing the reality that we are all complicit in this, and understanding and noticing that some people are more complicit than others, and that those people have betrayed our trust and in fact lied to us, and they continue to lie to us insofar as they say, oh, it's not too late, we're going to make everything fine, we're going to solve this problem, it's not that bad anyway, and then we've got the magic tech and say one way or another everything's going to be fine, and if everything really does go tits up, then don't worry, we can all get on a plane to Mars. The people who say that kind of message, they've stopped us from being able to take adequate action on this crisis, because they've convinced us that it's possible to continue to outsource this issue. They're going to take care of it. Government's going to take care of it. Scientists are going to take care of it. Technologists are going to take care of it. Companies are going to take care of it. Activists are going to take care of it. Guess what? Nobody's taken care of it. It hasn't been adequately taken care of. And that's why we're in the age of consequences. This is, in the old wonderful phrase of Greenpeace, a mind bomb. The idea that it's not 5 minutes to midnight, it's 5 minutes past midnight. We cannot outsource this any longer. We have to take care of it ourselves. And I think that's why most of you are here, because at some level you're already aware of that. In fact, many of you are already doing it. And actually, by doing it, you're putting to shame those who should know better, our so-called leaders who have failed to offer us the leadership, which if they had offered us, we wouldn't have had to have shouldered so much responsibility ourselves. So by the way, notice one thing about this. If anyone ever says to you in the future, it's too late, or it's not too late, the right question to ask is always, for what? For what is it too late? Yes, some things it's too late for, and other things it's not too late for. And that is actually an intelligent, grounded message that goes beyond the hysteria of the useless debate between it's too late and it's not too late, between the doomers and the Pollyannas. We don't have room, we don't have time anymore for doomers or Pollyannas. We have to get on with it ourselves. We have to stop outsourcing and start taking care of this crisis ourselves. And as we do so, we will be the ones offering leadership and modeling what needs to be done at every level. Absolutely crucial and central to this, obviously, is community resilience, including, crucially, food resilience. We're here in the UK, a country which is at the moment chronically incapable of feeding itself. This is an absolutely stupid position to be in at a time when the pressures on the world food system are just going to get worse and worse. And we may see some of this played out this year in relation to the Ukraine crisis. Ukraine, of course, one of the world's bread baskets, one of the places where we get most of our wheat from. And the absence of much of that wheat and other key grains already causing serious trouble in a number of countries around the world, especially North African countries. But if we ever think, yeah, this is essentially about climate justice, this is essentially about taking care of the global south, of the global poor, etc. On the one hand, that's kind of true. It's true that there are people on the climate front line much more than pretty much any of us probably in this room. And we need to do right by those people, and I'll come back to that point. But it's false to think it's all facing them and we're basically immune. And as I say, we might start to get a little bit of a sense of that later on this year, when we start to realize that in a chronically food insecure planet, it is completely bonkers to be chronically unable to feed ourselves. And if we were to change a number of things in this country, if we were to radically reduce food waste, if we were to eat a lot lower on the food chain, and if we were to get a lot more people back onto the land, we would be able to alter that situation very significantly. And some of you are involved in some aspects of that. So we need to build community resilience. We need to build food resilience. We need to do it for all sorts of reasons, but one of the reasons we need to do it is because we are in the age of consequences, and we are fooling ourselves if we think we are invulnerable to the tides that are starting to rip and rise through this world. When you make the shift, this mental shift to 5 minutes past midnight, then suddenly climate mitigation is not the only thing that matters. Right? In the 5 minutes to midnight space, we've been held for years in a space where people are saying, it's about 2050, or it's about 2040, or it's about 2030. It's about the changes we need to make now in order to keep ourselves safe in the future. And of course, they're half right, but they're also half wrong. When you say to most ordinary people 2040 or 2050, it sounds incalculably far off. It can't really be envisaged. It doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel like an urgent threat. When you say to people, you know what, we're vulnerable now, and we're becoming more vulnerable all the time. We're insufficiently resilient now. We need to build that resilience so that we become less vulnerable. And when you don't just say it, but you actually start to do it, well, that's another mind bomb, right? When people see us, by us, I mean literally some of the people in this room, doing stuff which is about building resilience, adapting ourselves to the changed world, to the consequences, the age of consequences that we're in, they start to get it. They start to think, they are actually preparing for a future which they think is near. God, maybe it's real. Maybe this isn't just some kind of problem for the scientists and the policymakers and for 2050 and so on. Maybe this is about us here now. So that's what I mean by saying adaptation can work as a mind bomb. When we stay in the space of climate mitigation, when we only talk about reducing greenhouse gas emissions and allegedly preventing dangerous climate change, we make it sound like it's a problem for the future. Well, guess what? It's not about preventing dangerous climate change anymore. Dangerous climate change is here. It's 5 past midnight. Yeah. When people start to get that, when they hear us talking about the importance of adaptation, and when they see us doing adaptation, then it starts to really sink in. This is real. This is not just one more item on a long laundry list of problems. This is a condition which determines our time. And guess what? It's going to be the only aspect of our time which really matters at the end of the day to younger people in the room. So if you want to concentrate your minds about the importance of this, ask yourself what questions the young people in the room or people who are as yet unborn will ask you in 10 years' time, or in 30 years' time, or in 50 years' time. There's 2 possible scenarios, very roughly. One scenario is the world is continuing to go faster and faster down the toilet, and these young people, or not so young by that time, are asking you, what did you do when there was still time? What did you do when there was still time to do something about it? That is the only question that people who are presently young will be interested in from the older generations in a generation or two's time if things have gone badly. They won't care about your good intentions. They won't care about all the other interesting aspects of your life. The only thing they will care about is what did you do when there was still time? On a more optimistic scenario, if we actually manage to get somewhere with what folks like us are trying to do, if we actually do undertake something like transformative adaptation, and I will explain in a moment a little bit more about what that is, the question will be somewhat similar. It will be, what did you do to help with the transformation? What did you do to show leadership during this transition? How did you help to secure our future through this difficult crisis that we've been in, that we're being effectively in permanently? Because this is a condition. It's not going to go away. The climate crisis is not a problem that can be solved. It is a condition. It is a new permanent condition of our existence. And the only question is, do we let it take us, or do we successfully adapt to it and start to no longer fuel the root causes of it? So the question young people will ask their elders in a generation or two's time, it will either be, what did you do while there was still time? Or what did you do to help make this transformation possible, such that actually the world is an okay place now, even though it's challenged? And so either way, the situation is the same, right? Everything depends upon us not outsourcing, no longer pretending it's 5 minutes to midnight and somebody's going to take care of it, but actually stepping up, taking responsibility, saying, yeah, it's 5 past midnight, and you know what? This is what I'm going to do. This is how I'm putting my shoulder to the grindstone to make the kind of changes that are needed. And those changes are transformational. The system that we are in is coming to an end. The only question is, will it end through a vicious collapse, or will it end more or less voluntarily through us deciding to transform the system to a different system that works? And what we need to do is we need to undertake transformative adaptation. So what is transformative adaptation? So transformative adaptation is adaptation that says, yes, it's 5 minutes to midnight. We can no longer pretend that this is a problem that can be solved, that is going to go away. We can no longer outsource it. We have to change the system. We have to do so in a way that works with nature rather than against nature. We have to do so in a way that creates a flourishing society rather than the problematic society we currently have. And we have to do so in a way that mitigates as well as adapts, because we have to reduce the long-term causes of the problem. So we need to be drawing down from the atmosphere. Of course, we need to be systematically moving off fossil fuels. Of course, we need to be moving to renewables. We need to be doing so in a way which is long-term sustainable, doesn't create new terrible environmental problems. We need to be thinking in a joined-up way. We need to be transforming the system, and we need to be doing it to a large extent from the bottom up, because we are not getting the leadership we need from the top down. And another part of this mind bomb of 5 past midnight, of adaptation, not just mitigation, is restoration. Once you realize that it's 5 past midnight, then you realize you are in a damaged world. And once you really accept that you're in a damaged world, then you have to start to think about how to restore it. to make it, where possible, beautiful and flourishing and joined up like it was before. So these are these wonderful mind bombs which we have and which we need, and which if you put them together can be transformative. Not 5 to midnight, 5 past midnight, not just mitigation, adaptation, and not just coping with what is, but trying to restore what was there before. In my title, I talk about how this is important, not just for community resilience, but for our mental health. What do I have in mind there? Well, one thing I have in mind is that obviously doing things like being out, working on the land more, building community, these things are good for our mental health, right? That's obvious, and it's also scientifically proved. But it also means something bigger. Because when you start to accept that it's 5 past midnight and we are in the age of consequences, it can be pretty challenging. It can be pretty mentally challenging. Some of you, perhaps like me, have had terrible nightmares. I mean, literally nightmares about what the future might be like. Or you spend some of your time stuck in, got a beautiful little moth that's taken refuge in the palm of my hand. How lovely. I'll try and not disturb it too much with my hand gestures. Yeah, when you contemplate what is and what will be, it's hard not to feel climate anxiety. It's hard not to feel ecological grief. Guess what? These things are a good thing. These are sane reactions to the situation, right? The insane thing to do would be to stick your fingers in your ears, go la, 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 everything's fine, and put on a happy face, which is kind of what the Pollyannas tell you to do. The stubborn optimists say, put on a happy face, no matter what, we can get there, we can solve this. That runs the risk of being a kind of pretense, of being a kind of ignoring of the reality of the situation that we're in. The reality of the situation that we're in is one such that if you're not sometimes frightened, then you're not paying attention. If you're not sometimes angry, then you're not sometimes feeling what is appropriate to a situation in which our trust has been betrayed and our leaders are not. Yeah, if you're not sometimes feeling grief, then you're not allowing yourself to feel the full connection with this situation and with this incredibly beautiful, unique planet that we live in, and with beautiful spaces like the one that is around us, but that has been wrested back from a countryside, much of which is a victim of industrial agriculture, which is denuding it and in many ways destroying it, and destroying the habitats of so many creatures that our nature in this country. The UK is terribly depleted. If you don't sometimes feel that as a cause for grief, then I want to say you're not fully human, or you're not fully engaged with the situation. So these emotions, these difficult emotions, these so-called negative emotions, these are a sign of health. These are a sign of mental health. Right? Mindbomb might strike you as a kind of violence analogy. As I say, the point of the analogy is not necessarily that these ideas, when they explode in your mind, do so instantly. They can do so slowly. Whether they do so slowly or quickly, in a way, it doesn't really matter. The point is that we start to think and see with different eyes in a different way, and to feel in a different way. And part of what we feel is the reality of the situation. When we accept that it's 5 minutes past midnight, what's going on is partly that we are feeling the pain of living in a damaged world, of living in a world where the future of our children is not secure. And frankly, our own future for most of us is not very secure. So I'm in my 50s. What do I think the world is going to be like by the time I'm in my 80s if I get to live that long? Well, I think unless we get our act together and start to take seriously that we're in the age of consequences and start to act at scale together, joined up, unless we start to transformatively adapt, I think the future is going to be pretty bloody awful by the time I'm a really old person. And sometimes I'm scared about that. And sometimes I feel very sad about it. And these are good things. These are good things, these emotions, because they motivate us. That's what emotion is, right? Something that mobilizes, something that motivates, something that moves you, right? It moves me. It moves me to tears. It moves me to action. It moves me to change along with others. Right? That's what it's all about. So if anyone ever says to you, oh, well, you know, maybe you should kind of tone down your rhetoric a little bit because you're making people a bit anxious, you can say in response, it's good that they're feeling anxious. That's a sane response to the situation. What's important is that a container is put around that anxiety, that there is support available to support people who are feeling angry or terrified or whatever it is. And what's also necessary is that we have channels that we can direct ourselves into, that we can be moved into to actually respond appropriately to this terrible situation that we are in. And that's what we're doing, right? That's why we're here. That's why so many of us are already involved in this stuff, and some of us who are already not involved in it want to become involved in it, and that's why you're here. And so that's what I'm saying, that these difficult emotions are the right response to the situation. They are a human response. They are a wise response. They are a healthy response. They are what it is to be mentally healthy at this time. What it is to be mentally healthy at this time is to sometimes feel and process and be honest about and look at these difficult emotions. And they can move us in the right direction. And they are absolutely vital. We are literally vital. They are life. They are what is going to give us life. They are life itself, and they are what is going to give us more life. And we've seen some of this in the last few years. We saw it with Greta Thunberg and the other school climate strikers. Right? Greta's genius is that she expresses authentically her anger and her fear and communicates it in a way that is effective to people. I was involved in the launching of Extinction Rebellion. And Extinction Rebellion cut through where so many other environmental movements, which had been stuck in a 5 minutes to midnight rhetoric, had not cut through, because we were prepared to say, you don't get this right, we're heading for extinction. There were so many communications experts and psychologists who came to us at the time we were launching it, said, for God's sake, don't call yourselves Extinction Rebellion. You can't say that. You'll just make everybody, you'll just put them off, or they'll just feel a sense of doom, and don't do it, please. And they were all wrong. They were all wrong. We cut through where previous environmental movements, which had tried to soften the pill and had not been honest about the moment that we're at, had failed to cut through. But now what is needed is to go beyond what those movements have accomplished in terms of raising consciousness. Now what is needed is to start to actually make the changes on the ground, which our leaders have failed to initiate and which we know are called for by the situation. And if we do that, that is the way that we will start to really feel better. That is the way we'll start to really feel energized and really feel these emotions moving through us and not get stuck in them. Because none of these emotions are a problem. Even despair is not a problem, as long as you have a way of looking at it, processing it, working through it, acting on the basis of it, right? Sometimes feeling a little bit of despair or a little bit of depression, even that can be an appropriate response to the situation that we're in. So the struggle to define adaptation, what to do in the age of consequences, is going to be the defining struggle of the 2020s. If what it is to adapt to the damaged world that we're in becomes understood as we simply want to build higher seawalls, keep the waters out, carry on with the same system within, then we're F-U-C-K-E-D. If what happens in the coming years is that everybody starts drifting towards a sense of doom and hopelessness, then obviously that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If people keep on trying to fool themselves that everything's going to be fine if we only push a little bit harder and try doing the same thing we've been doing all these years and increase our standing orders to Greenpeace from £3 a month to £4 a month, then again, we're going down the pan. There's one way in which we cannot go down the pan. If we face the situation together resolutely, if we start to transformatively adapt at scale, if we join up these wonderful bottom-up enterprises that so many people involved in this meeting here today are already involved in, that many more people want to get involved in. People are hungry for this. They're hungry now to know what to do. And guess what? We've got a lot of great things for them to do. a lot of great work for them to do. If we do it together, if we face reality, then it will be not just something which actually works to transform the external situation, it will transform the way we feel as well. Because I can tell you, and many of you in the room will already know this, taking action on the ground, taking authentic, regenerative action, speaking truth about all of this and being prepared to hear it and share it with each other. There's nothing more healthy than that. Thank you. Well, so what I was trying to say was that, like you, I don't have a lot of faith in governments to act adequately on this crisis. They've been given the opportunity to do so, and they have failed to take it. Some have failed worse than others, which means, of course, that some have done better than others. And there are places in the world that we can point to where there are various kinds of good initiatives and support for the right kinds of activities. We could talk about some of the aspects of what's gone on in Costa Rica, in New Zealand, some things in the Nordic countries, some things in Cuba. There is nowhere in the world that is stepping up adequately to the situation. And the number of people who are willing to name the reality of the situation is still pretty small. It's very difficult for politicians to do that, right? It's very difficult for politicians to make this shift from 5 to midnight to 5 past midnight. Yeah, because politicians love to tell stories about how everything's going to be better, how there's going to be a better tomorrow, how we're going to sort everything out, how if you trust them, then everything's going to be fine. Yeah, for them to make the shift to being able and willing to say, you know what, because of the mistakes and inadequacies that we and our predecessors have made, you're in real trouble, and we're in real trouble, and there's no way around this. There's no solution to this problem. There's no ignoring it any longer. That's quite a difficult message for a politician to bring. There are, of course, precedents. It has been done in wartime style situations, for example. Yeah, so there are hopeful precedents we can point to. And what we can also, I think, say to politicians, because I have these conversations with politicians, including friends and colleagues who are in politics, as I have been myself in the past. What I say to them is, if you were to dare to do this, it could be not only game-changing, but also be a cause of huge admiration and respect for you, right? Because people are really hungry for that kind of authenticity. Again, that's why Extinction Rebellion and Greta Thunberg were so successful, because they offered an authenticity which didn't seem present in politics, which didn't seem present in business, which didn't seem present in conventional environmental activism. So actually, there's a huge potential payoff here for anyone brave enough to go down this path of saying it's 5 past midnight. We need to get serious about transformative adaptation. This is not about 2050, etc. This is about vulnerability and unresilience that we're in now. This is about a situation where damage has been done. We need to start trying to restore some of that damage, etc. There is a huge opportunity there, I believe, for any politician brave enough to say that. But pretty much no one in politics has yet. So the situation is that we need to do a lot of this ground up. What does that mean? It means a whole load of things. And I've written about some of those things in my writings, which you can find on the web and in my books. But in terms of what we're talking about here this afternoon, a really important aspect of it is community resilience, is building through what we do on farmland and also in the water and in the oceans, on whatever scale we're able to operate therein. And what I see starting to happen more and more is people getting interested in and starting to practice regenerative farming, agri-wilding, combining agriculture and rewilding, agroecology in general, straight rewilding. All these things are starting to happen more in a country like the UK, and the UK is not isolated here. And one of the things I'm trying to do is to give people a sense of, this is starting to happen, and what you do and what we do and what you could do to contribute to this, it joins up into a greater effort. Because I think a lot of people are put off from really throwing themselves into this and from really daring to face the situation, from really daring to feel the difficult emotions that go with it, because they feel a little bit isolated and they have a bit of a sense of hopelessness. about whether what they can do really makes any difference. People sometimes ask me, yeah, but what can I do? I'm just one individual. And I say to them, don't be an individual. Right? Join up with other people and recognize that there are people across this county and across this country and across the world who are doing that. So in a sense, we're all kind of joined up into one kind of wave that's starting to move in the same direction. And when that wave gets stronger and bigger, then it will start to put pressure on governments and politicians. Because one of the reasons, of course, why they haven't acted enough to date is they haven't felt enough pressure to do so, electoral pressure, political pressure. So that's in a way what I'm trying to suggest, that if we keep trying to outsource this to politicians, we're going to be monumentally stuffed. But if we work on it more ourselves from the ground up, and if we recognize that more and more of us are doing that, then we'll start to get into a virtuous circle. And that is the kind of situation that can start to make it easier for politicians and leaders to do what they ought to have been doing anyway, to lead. Sure, but that was the point of what I was trying to say around, if we shift the story from we've got one more chance to save ourselves to, you know what, we've missed these chances. We're in the age of consequences. Damage is here, worse damage is coming, and it's not long off. It's not 2050, right? It's happening now. And every year we move deeper into the danger zone. Every year we move deeper into the zone of increasing vulnerability. I think that's part of how we get people to care, to understand that we have been let down. We have been, our trust has been betrayed. And as a result, we are in danger now. And at any time, this danger could come home to roost. Look at the situations that have occurred around the world in the last few years. I mean, since our weather started to spin out of control in about 2016, so many terrifying situations in so many countries. Just recently, for example, the absolutely atrocious, well, current heat waves in a large amount of Asia, the appalling wildfires in Australia. The terrible heat dome last year, completely unprecedented, really scares climate scientists across much of North America. And those are just developed countries, let alone what's going on in large parts of the global south. We in this country have actually been quite lucky in the last several years. This luck will not hold. Sorry to have to say that, that's how it is. It's virtually certain that in the next few years, the UK will experience some really savage climate-caused event. We don't know what it will be. Could well be a mega heat wave. My money, if I was a betting man, would be on wildfires. We are pitifully prepared in this country with regard to wildfires, partly because we've got such a small record of having had them compared to many other countries in Europe and around the world, partly because our government is pitifully prepared on most of these vulnerability and adaptation and resilience issues. Sometime in the next few years, it is almost certain that there will be a massive climate disaster in this country, as most countries in the world have now experienced. And what I'm saying is we need to be ready for that. We need to be telling people that that is becoming more likely all the time. We need to be getting them to join up the dots a bit, noticing, oh, right, so we had these terrifying floods in Germany and France, this massive kind of heat waves in many countries in the world, wildfires here, wildfires there. Britain is not immune, we don't somehow have some kind, Brexit didn't give us some kind of invulnerability to environmental conditions. What I'm trying to suggest is bring people's focus onto the danger that they are in and their children and all that depend upon them now, rather than having them think only about long-term remote possibilities. And that is part of the mega mind shift that can get more people to care. I just feel shocked at if we shift the story from we've got one more chance to save ourselves to, you know what, we've missed these chances. We're in the age of consequences. Damage is here, worse damage is coming. And it's not long off. It's not 2050, right? It's happening now. And every year we move deeper into the danger zone. Every year we move deeper into the zone of increasing vulnerability. I think that's part of how we get people to care, to understand that we have been let down. We have been, our trust has been betrayed. And as a result, we are in danger now. And at any time, this danger could come home to roost. Look at the situations that have occurred around the world in the last few years. I mean, since our weather started to spin out of control in about 2016, so many terrifying situations in so many countries. Just recently, for example, the absolutely atrocious, well, current heat waves in a large amount of Asia, the appalling wildfires in Australia. The terrible heat dome last year, completely unprecedented, really scares climate scientists across much of North America. And those are just developed countries, let alone what's going on in large parts of the global south. We in this country have actually been quite lucky in the last several years. This luck will not hold. Sorry to have to say that, that's how it is. It's virtually certain that in the next few years, the UK will experience some really savage climate-caused event. We don't know what it will be. Could well be a mega heat wave. My money, if I was a betting man, would be on wildfires. We are pitifully prepared in this country with regard to wildfires, partly because we've got such a small record of having had them compared to many other countries in Europe and around the world, partly because our government is pitifully prepared on most of these vulnerability and adaptation and resilience issues. Sometime in the next few years, it is almost certain that there will be a massive climate disaster in this country, as most countries in the world have now experienced. And what I'm saying is we need to be ready for that. We need to be telling people that that is becoming more likely all the time. We need to be getting them to join up the dots a bit, noticing, oh, right, so we had these terrifying floods in Germany and France, this massive kind of heat waves in many countries in the world, wildfires here, wildfires there. Britain is not immune, we don't somehow have some kind, Brexit didn't give us some kind of invulnerability to environmental conditions. What I'm trying to suggest is bring people's focus onto the danger that they are in and their children and all that depend upon them now, rather than having them think only about long-term remote possibilities. And that is part of the mega mind shift that can get more people to care. What I'm suggesting is that this is starting to shift, and we can get that shift accelerated if we change the narrative from 5 to midnight to 5 past midnight. We can get that shift accelerated if we get people to focus more on adaptation and not just mitigation. We can get that shift accelerated if we get people to notice their vulnerability, to notice what's happening in other countries and to realize that could happen here too. If we get people to notice the kinds of vulnerabilities that the COVID crisis and that the Ukraine crisis have shown us exist in our system, and get them to understand, for goodness sake, let's act before that really gets accelerated further and takes us down. And a lot of what a lot of us in this room are about, and there's many more people not in this room who are primed, who are ready now. I know this partly from having given these kinds of talks to much more mainstream, if you will, if you don't mind me saying so, crowds, where what so many people say to me is, I want to know what to do. People are looking for leadership. They're not getting it from politicians and leaders. They can get it from us. And the short answer is not nearly enough, not yet. There have been some positive developments as a result of the Ukraine tragedy, especially in some European countries, which have woken up to the fact that being part of the worldwide fossil fuels market is not very intelligent. Being dependent on that is not very intelligent. In this country, the response from politics, again, has been pitiful. there remains an opportunity there. And this is going to run and run for quite a while longer. So, you know, if one is looking for a kind of big context within which to put what we're doing, that's part of it. It's to say to people, part of the way that you can notice that this is not a kind of long-term distant problem of the horizons. This is something which we need to be thinking about and acting on now, is that our energy system and our food system are being thrown into relief by what's happening in Ukraine. And this is small compared to the situation that is developing vis-a-vis the climate and biodiversity. Yeah. So if we're smart, we're going to learn from these warning shots across our bows. I think maybe we're smart. People sometimes use the analogy of frogs and say, oh yeah, you know, frogs, you put them in water and you heat the water up slowly, you know, they just boil to death. It's not true. Most frogs, if you do that, they'll jump out. At some point they'll jump out. Let's be as wise as frogs. Shouldn't be too hard. Thank you. What to do in the age of consequences? Taking action on the ground, taking authentic, regenerative action, speaking truth about all of this and being prepared to hear it and share it with each other. We join up these wonderful bottom-up enterprises that so many people are involved in